saying that they weren't served the notices or whatever, or the wind blew it away. What are you going to say next? Well, it was raining, so it maybe all the paper, all the ink that said, that they had to be a court just dripped away, and they were just like, oh, well, it doesn't count now. No, okay? These people are smart enough to make plenty of their own decisions, and they shouldn't be given all these ridiculous blanket excuses. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And basically, what they have come to the conclusion is that enough tenants aren't going to eviction court, to fight their cases, okay? They're just skipping court. They're accepting the evictions, and landlords are winning their cases too often. At least that's what the tenant advocates believe. And they don't think that's right. And they were trying to figure out why. Why are so many tenants missing eviction court? And one of the tenant advocates seems to believe that, tenants are just not smart enough to figure out the eviction process and their notices are just blowing away with the wind. But before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Why do you think that tenants aren't going to eviction court? Okay, my personal opinion is because they know they can't win their case because the landlord has them dead to rights with a clear lease violation or for not paying the rent, and they have nothing to, there's no fight. There's no reason to fight it. They know that they've already lost, and by going to court, they're just wasting their own time, okay? So, this article comes from charlotteobserver.com, and it says, absent from court, where are the tenants who missed their eviction hearings? Yeah, and let's find out what they think. On a recent day at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse, people milled about the hallway, waiting for eviction hearings to start. Later, in a courtroom, a magistrate called a list of 10 names, answered only by silence. These were the names of tenants who were supposed to be in court that morning. They had not shown up. Denise Chapman, 51, who requested to use her middle name, is a tenant who decided to skip her eviction hearing. And now they're going to go over what she said, so excuse my broken English here. I ain't going to court because they won't give us a place to stay, Chapman said. I am not saying you should take responsibility for me and my kids, but what I am saying is there has to be some more empathy in you. This is just what I imagine she sounded like, okay? After being homeless for 7 years with her kids and grandkids, Chapman found a stable source of income through cooking and eventually started her own food truck business, but the pandemic shut it down. She is now behind about $16,000 in rent. She reached out to RAMP CLT, the organization in charge of doling out rental and mortgage assistance in Mecklenburg County, for help, but said that she has gotten no response. Well, like I said before, I didn't believe in all the lockdowns, the stay-at-home orders, etc. And unfortunately, this lady here, her food truck went down because of all that nonsense. And so she lost her source of income. However, okay, there were extended unemployment benefits. There were 3 separate stimulus checks, okay? There was the child tax credit. Okay, there were all of these different things in place, and she could have sent some of that money to her landlord, but she chose not to and just decided to stay there instead. And now she's facing eviction, but didn't go to court. So the landlord basically gets a default judgment out of it. But that's probably because she knew she didn't have any real case to fight. What's the point of going to court if you know you're going to lose anyway? So probably to her, she's just like, hey, we'll just move out when they tell us to go. We'll just go. What's the point of me going down there and wasting my time? So, it's completely understandable. But, it's funny here. They say that they called 10 people and none of them showed up. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, now let's continue. Chapman's story is not unique. This is the reality for tenants in Mecklenburg County and throughout the United States. Many renters facing eviction do not appear in court for their hearings, which then leads to a default judgment, an automatic eviction. In North Carolina, renters can be locked out of their home in a matter of weeks if they do not appear in court. Reasons abound for absent tenants. And here we go, okay? They're going to say the reasons that they believe that tenants aren't showing up to court. And let's see if I agree with them or not, because, sometimes they throw some craziness out here. There are numerous reasons as to why tenants might not show up for their eviction hearing, said Juan Hernandez, a lawyer with the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy. Eviction notices could be taken off their doors or blown away by the wind. People might not understand the eviction process. Unauthorized immigrants may worry their efforts to apply for legal status could be negatively affected. People might not be able to take off work or find child care. So basically, this, tenant advocate here, basically, the people are too stupid, too lazy, and then, basically blame everything except for the tenants themselves for why they didn't show up for court, okay? That's what he's saying. He's like, the people are too stupid to understand the eviction process. And then it throws in the unauthorized immigrant thing. They're afraid of going to court because they might get deported, whatever. Okay? Listen, stop making excuses for these people, okay? They're grown-ups. They made the decision not to go to court. Then they have to deal with it, period. Saying that they weren't served the notices or whatever, or the wind blew it away. What are you going to say next? Well, it was raining, so it maybe all the paper, all the ink that said, that they had to be a court just dripped away, and they were just like, oh, well, it doesn't count now. No, okay? These people are smart enough to make plenty of their own decisions, and they shouldn't be given all these ridiculous blanket excuses. Since the Supreme Court ruled the CDC did not have the authority to extend the federal eviction moratorium on August 26th, more renters have been at risk of eviction. Although eviction filings are still below historical levels, the CDC moratorium was put in place to limit overcrowding and prevent more people from experiencing homelessness as COVID-19 was spreading. With a shortage of rental properties and prices spiking for units across the country, tenants do not have many options for places to go. Across the country, the number of eviction filings varies depending on the state and county. Jurisdictions that had local moratoria are still seeing lower levels of eviction filings, whereas the number are higher where the federal moratorium wasn't enforced or there were no local moratoria, according to Emily Limmerman, a research specialist at the Eviction Lab at Princeton University. Yeah, and thank goodness that the CDC's moratorium was thrown out, okay? It took way too long, but the whole thing was unconstitutional since the very beginning. And, I was screaming it at the time. Nobody, was listening to me, of course. But once the Supreme Court took the action and threw that thing out, everyone around the country who didn't have a state or a local eviction moratorium in place was finally able to get the ball rolling on the whole eviction process again. So, there are more filings right now, but a lot of it is because of the backlog that was created from basically having a year and a half where you weren't able to evict everyone. My personal opinion is there's not going to be this huge tsunami of evictions that they keep talking about, okay? Landlords worked with a lot of people. A lot of people just left on their own. Some people used their stimulus money and extra unemployment benefits, etc., to actually pay their landlords. And now the economy is way stronger than it was, in the very first few months of all this. And, jobs are plentiful. Jobs are paying more than ever. And so tenants are finally able to, work and pay their rent. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be this huge tsunami of evictions like they were originally expecting. So it seems ridiculous to me that they were making these sort of excuses for why these tenants aren't showing up to court. But it should be expected from these sorts of tenant advocates. So let us continue. If I can find the place where I left off. Landlords have been delayed in filing evictions in Mecklenburg County, said Kim Graham, the executive director of the Greater Charlotte Apartment Association. Additionally, the courts are still hearing fewer cases per day than before the pandemic to limit the number of people in a courtroom, a precaution in place due to COVID-19. Those facing eviction are more likely to be women and racial minorities, as they have been disproportionately impacted economically by the pandemic, the Eviction Lab reports. These findings were true long before the pandemic as well. Yeah, so don't act like suddenly all of a sudden, well, now women and minorities are facing it even harder. No, they always were facing higher rates of eviction, okay? That is just an unfortunate truth, okay? Incomes are lower, for female-led households and for ethnic minorities, and that's just the truth, okay? So it makes sense that there are more evictions in those cases because they are more rent burdened. They spend more of their income towards rent than other groups. So that's just the way it is. So, BS article basically. They're making a lot of excuses for tenants. The main thing though is that landlords finally are able to get back to normal and get these tenants out of their properties who haven't been paying. Okay, so yeah.